Welcome to Everything Tax, Andersen's podcast series. I am Tejas Kapasi, a senior manager with the corporate tax team. And with me, I have Sarthak, who is the assistant manager in the corporate tax team. So today we are going to take up a topic on corporate tax registrations, and considering the recent decision on timelines and the potential penalty risk which all companies have. This is one of there's a lot of traction which has been built in the industry. Earlier, the companies were a little laid back, we can say, because there were no immediate timelines. But considering the new decision now, everyone has to gear up and be ready of how to approach the corporate tax registration. So we'll take you through some of the key aspects from the decision, how to go about the decisions, and certain challenges which companies are facing. So, yes, Sarthak, how I think we can start with just discussing about what broadly the decision says about UE entities, what are the timelines prescribed, and what may be the penalty exposure if the companies don't meet the timelines.
Right. Thank you, Tejas, for the introduction. So this new decision, which has been introduced by the FTA, is applicable effective from 1st of March 2024. It deals with situations wherein the timelines are prescribed for the entities to initiate the CT registration process.
Right.
So here, the timelines for initiating the CT registration process for the UE entities is based on the license issuance date. When I talk about license issuance date, we have to consider the month in which the license was issued, and regardless of the year wherein the license was issued.
Right.
Herein, they have provided a schedule wherein we first need to check the month in which the license was issued, and accordingly we need to figure out the end date for at which we have to file the registration application. One thing that we need to note here is the timeline is not to obtain the CT registration. The timeline is to file the CT registration application. Also, the FTA decision is providing for a penalty wherein an administrative penalty of AD 10,000 dirhams can be levied in case there's a breach in the timeline prescribed.
Oh, yeah, that's, I think they have completely based the registration on the trade license issue date, and you have to focus on issue date. But I think it can get a bit complex when there are multiple licenses which are issued, say entities having branches, or maybe entities having multiple licenses in terms of commercial license and industrial license. So what do you think? How to go about in determining the end date in those cases?
Right. So the decision is also talking about the cases wherein there are multiple licenses. The decision is saying that you need to pick up the earliest date. So if at all there are multiple branches of one entity, and also if there are multiple licenses of one single entity, we need to pick the earliest date and accordingly figure out the end date for the registration.
So I think this is very critical given the penalty is high, and so companies will have to determine the deadline. That's the first thing I think which is to be done.
I think that's the first step, but there are multiple nuances to the CT registration process. So Tejas, if an entity has to approach this process of registration, how should we go about it? What are the aspects which are to be kept in mind? What is the procedure that an entity should know before initiating the CT registration process?
Right. I think that's very important. What to follow as a step plan to do and to have a smooth implementation of the registration. So I think the first and foremost, you said it about the timeline. So I think now it's critical for entities to determine first the CT registration timelines depending on their trade licenses, and have and prioritize their registrations which are maybe falling due the nearest timeline, which is 31st of May 2024. So I think first step is to determine the timelines based on the licenses, and then move on with the other CT process. So there, the second step could be in terms of whether you are a VAT registered entity or you have not obtained a VAT registration. So there's a different process, a bit different for both of the cases. So I'll take up the scenario in which an entity is already registered with VAT. So there, I think the first thing you have to check is to log in on the Emirates tax portal, and given the new portal, they have also changed a bit how the details are reflected. So there's a taxable person details tab which has come, which is different from corporate tax and VAT. It's a common tab which reflects all the common details of the entities, which needs to be updated. So the first and foremost thing you do is to check whether all the details which are there in the taxable person tab are updated or not. If you have any discrepancies there, or if a error is popping up, many of the clients are also seeing some error getting popped up there where their trade licenses are not updated in that portal,
Right.
and a prompt that they need to update it, and then only they can proceed with the CT registration. So this is the first thing you check. In step 3, I think you'll have to collate all the errors or any discrepancies which you face, where you might highlight to the, or might get a clarification from your consultant, or you can approach the FTA helpline as well. So this is also important because there are many gray areas where you're not exactly sure what detail to update. So this could be the next thing, and then you go about, once you have updated the taxable person details, you wait for the FTA to give a confirmation and go ahead on that and approve that details on taxable person tab, and then you shift to the corporate tax registration. So in the corporate tax registration, I think 80 to 90% details are auto-filled, and it's coming from the taxable person details. So it's very important and critical to first have everything in check. And then the CT registration is just to fill up few balance details, say authorized signatory and contact details, and then you can file the application. So this is mainly for the entities where they have already registered under the for VAT. Say for entities where they have not obtained a VAT registration, they can go about directly. They can log in onto the portal and just register on the portal, and then similarly, there is no taxable person tab here. They will have to directly update the details on the corporate tax registration tab, and the details are very similar. They don't have to do checking, or they don't have to wait for the FTA to approve certain part first. So then they can directly file the CT application with all the critical details.
Right. So I understand that the CT application form is same in both the scenarios, wherein an entity is registered under VAT or an entity is not registered under VAT. So the CT application forms remains the same. In case where an entity is already registered under VAT, there is a prerequisite to update the taxable person details first, wherein if there is any details which are not updated, or they were updated and now they are expired, the details are expired.
Right.
We understand that the portal has also been recently updated, wherein the clients are coming to us and they are saying that the details are not properly auto-filled in the taxable person details, while they mentioned all those details at the time of VAT registration. So those details will have to also be updated in the taxable person details, and then only an entity should proceed with the CT registration application to give a complete and a correct picture when you are filing the CT registration application.
I think that's true. Even if you're not getting an error on the portal, it's very critical to check whether the details are correct, so that you don't give any wrong details while filing the CT registration application.
Right. And FTA can anyways question you on each and every aspect that you are updating. So that's also a critical area which we need to keep in mind before updating any details under taxable person details.
Yes. So what we have seen practically in many of our clients is for each of the, mainly for authorized signatory details, where you are updating, say, your memorandum of association or your power of attorney. They're asking questions around that, and they're seeing whether it's a proper document trail to which backs up that the authorized signatory is the correct person which is coming from the document. So this is one thing which you need to look at. And we have seen clients where there are queries coming in for a period of 15-20 days as well before you get the final registration. So for entities where the timeline is 31st May, you really need to get up and start the process immediately, because the overall process from the filing the application, doing the groundwork, filing the application, and reaching to a conclusion, and then getting the registration is a time-consuming process. Though the timeline is just to file the application, but to get the approval on the taxable person details also takes time. So,
Tejas, if we talk about natural person, if a natural person is to decide whether he's required to register or not, how should he decide that thing? Also, what will be the timelines for a natural person to register himself?
Yeah, I think natural person, first you have to see the applicability of the law for natural persons, whether it's applicable, whether they are carrying out any business activities in UAE or not.
Okay.
If they are not carrying out any business activities, they need not register. If they do carry out any business activities, the next thing you check is the turnover, the turnover threshold which is given under the law, which is for a calendar year. So if your business activities are generating a turnover of more than 1 million dirhams, then you need to register. If less than that, then you are exempt from that registration. So this is mainly about the applicability and when to apply for the registration. In terms of timelines, the decision prescribes a timeline of 3 months from the end of the calendar year where for which it is applicable. So here it's very important to understand that a calendar year is taken as a base and no other year can be followed for a natural person. So you need, so say for example, you're seeing the registration deadline for financial year 2024 for a natural person, then it would be 31st of March 2025, which is 3 months from end of the calendar year.
So, Tejas, in case of a non-UAE entity, is there a requirement to register firstly? And if yes, then what are the timelines there in the law?
Yes, this is interesting actually because some entities might be required to register and some entities might not, depending again on the applicability as per the law. So, if you are a non-resident just earning some income which from UAE, which they call it as state source income, then registration is exempt. But if you are a non-resident carrying out business activities in the UAE and having a presence in form of a permanent establishment, then you need to obtain a registration. So here the timelines would depend on at what point in time your permanent establishment or place of business was set up in UAE. So if it's prior to 1st of March 2024, then the timeline is in terms of 9 months from the start when you have a PE in UAE. And in case you have constituted a PE or you have set up a branch which is after 1st of March 2024, then it's 6 months from the date when you set up that branch or have a place of business in UAE.
Another practical challenge which the entities are facing is in case wherein there are multiple branches in UAE of a non-UAE entity. So, what's the registration requirement? Do they need to obtain multiple registrations or it's just one single registration?
No, for that, I think it's a single registration which is required because the law says the registration applicability is on a person or a taxable person, which is single entity, irrespective of its multiple branches in UAE. So, though they will have to give details of all those multiple branches in the application, but the application would be a single one. So this is similar to, I think, what the process is followed for UAE branches or branches of a UAE entity. What about the applicability on unincorporated partnership or fiscally transparent entities which are there in UAE? Do they need to register? Because the law also mentions that the taxability might flow back to the owners of that entity. So do they have to get a separate registration there?
Okay, so fiscally transparent entities is a very interesting aspect for registration from registration perspective. So an unincorporated partnership is required to register for corporate tax purposes. There is an authorized partner in the unincorporated partnership who has to take a registration. The registration number that will be given will be an inactive number, which means to say that this registration is required only for compliance sake. This will not make the unincorporated partnership a taxable person.
Okay.
So the registration is yes required. Furthermore, the partners of the unincorporated partnership will have to determine the registration requirement in their hands as well. So if a partner in an unincorporated partnership is a juridical person, it will anyways be having a registration requirement. If a partner in a unincorporated partnership is a natural person, then the requirement to register will depend upon the turnover limit as we just discussed.
Right. So I think the authorities want a record of the unincorporated partnerships, and that's why they are saying to get just a registration number, even if the corporate tax is not applicable.
Right. So also for family foundations, which is another interesting concept, which is very common in UAE. So a family foundation has to register itself in its own capacity, and then they can file an application with the FTA to become a fiscally transparent entity. Okay. Wherein the taxability will flow up in the hands of the persons who are the members of the family foundation.
Understood. I think the first step is to get the registration and then do the application if they want to be treated as a transparent entity.
Right.
Okay, I think with this we come to the end of the podcast. We have broadly covered how an entities can approach the registration process and what are the key challenges being faced and how the decision which has recently come in will play an impact. So I think the next thing to do for the companies is to just gear up and start with the registration process. You can anytime approach us as well in case of any queries you have, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you.